The city never slept. It growled like a hungry beast, engines roaring, horns screaming, people racing as if time itself were chasing them. Neon lights cut through the fog, and the bitter smell of smoke clung to the night air like a memory that refused to fade. In a narrow alley behind a row of old brick buildings lived Farid Malik and his wife Nadia. Their 2 children, Omar and Sara, were still young enough to dream freely without the scars that life later carves into the human heart. Their home was small, barely enough space for 4 people to breathe inside at once. The walls were cracked, the roof leaked, and the kitchen was too tiny for Nadia to turn without bumping her elbow against the stove. But every corner of that house glowed with warmth, laughter, and love, the kind of home that money alone can never build. Every morning at 5 a.m., before the sun had even touched the sleeping city, Farid rose with aching bones and hands so bruised that even warm water stung his skin. He worked in a metal workshop, bending iron rods, welding steel frames, lifting heavy sheets until his back burned and sweat fell like rain. His body was crumbling long before he ever allowed his spirit to. Yet every evening he returned home with a smile. "Nadia, my love, how was your day?" he would ask, placing his lunchbox on the old wooden table. Nadia spent her days sewing clothes for wealthy families who never learned her name. The needle pricked her fingers and sometimes blood stained the fabric. But she kept going, because every stitch was one step closer to the future they prayed for. At night, while their parents worked, Omar and Sara sat beneath a flickering bulb that hummed loudly as if protesting the burden of staying alive. Omar studied engineering textbooks borrowed from a dusty library. Sara sketched dress designs with pencils that had been sharpened until they were too short to hold. "One day, Mama," Sara whispered, hugging her sketchbook to her chest, "I will make dresses that the whole world will admire." Nadia kissed her forehead softly. "And I will sit in the front row," she promised. Farid placed a hand on Omar's shoulder. "And you, my son, you will build things that stand taller than mountains." Omar's eyes shone with a fire so bright the darkness could not dim it. "I will, Father. I promise." They were not rich in wealth, but they were rich in hope. And hope is the seed from which miracles grow. Years passed. Struggles did not disappear, but they began to change shape. Farid was promoted to supervisor in the workshop, his dedication impossible to ignore. Nadia's sewing skills gained attention. Customers returned, asking only for her hands to bring their clothes to life. Word spread, quietly at first, then louder, about the family who worked harder than anyone else. They saved every coin, cutting luxuries, skipping meals, sleeping less, praying more. Finally, after years of sacrifice, Farid stood in front of a vacant building for sale, a dusty shell of what used to be a metal business. His hands trembled as he held the key. "We will build our own workshop," he whispered, voice filled with disbelief. "Our dream starts today." Nadia's eyes filled with tears, her hands pressed against her mouth. Omar and Sara embraced them tightly. That night, they did not sleep. They cleaned the building until sunrise, scraping rust from walls, sweeping thick layers of dust, painting until their arms shook. It was not just a workshop. It was the foundation of their future. Success, when earned through suffering, tastes sweeter than honey. Customers began arriving one by one, then in waves. Farid's craftsmanship transformed the workshop into a thriving business. Nadia expanded into textiles, designing uniforms for schools and small companies. Soon, their children joined them. Omar, now a young engineer with a scholarship and awards, redesigned the workshop layout, doubling production. Sara's fashion talent grew into a clothing line adored by local stores. They named the business Malik and Company Innovations, because unity was their strength. Within 5 years, they were among the most respected families in the city. They bought a large, beautiful house, a house built not from bricks, but from years of sweat, tears, and sacrifice. Every wall told a story. Every corner held a memory. Neighbors spoke about them with admiration. They built everything with their own hands. Their children are their pride. Look how far they've come. No one heard the quiet warning hidden beneath success. Not every blessing can survive human ambition. As the business grew, so did expectations. Money poured in. People bowed. Invitations, opportunities, applause. Everything the family once dreamed of became real. But success is like a mirror. It reflects who we truly are. And sometimes the reflection is monstrous. Omar began spending more time with wealthy friends who spoke the language of ego. They mocked humility, dismissed tradition, and worshipped power. Sentiment destroys growth, they told him. Real leaders don't carry dead weight. Sara entered a world of fashion elites, people who measured worth not by character but by brands, status, and fame. The more praise they received, the smaller their parents seemed to them. Nadia felt the change first, a cold distance creeping in quietly. Farid noticed the silence that replaced shared meals. The laughter that once filled their home faded like smoke. Success had come with a price none of them expected. One night, Omar arrived home late. Expensive perfume on his clothes, arrogance in his stride. Farid waited at the dining table. Son, you missed an important investors' meeting, he said gently. Omar brushed past him. I'm not a child anymore, Father. I don't need you to guide me. Farid's chest tightened. I don't guide you because you're weak. I guide you because I'm still your father. Omar's voice turned sharp. Maybe it's time you step aside. You're holding the business back. The word struck harder than any hammer Farid had ever lifted. Sara was no different. She dismissed suggestions, rolled her eyes at traditions, forgot the hands that stitched her first dress. One afternoon she yelled, We don't need outdated thinking slowing us down. It's time for a new direction. Nadia's lips trembled. Sara, everything you have came from our sacrifices. Sara snapped. And now, everything we have is because of our talent. You and Father wouldn't understand. The room fell silent. That night, Nadia cried quietly into her hands, her tears soaking the pillow until dawn. Farid whispered as he held her shaking shoulders, We built a palace for our children, and now we are strangers in our own home. The breaking point came on a stormy night. Rain crashed against the windows, the wind howling like grief itself. The family gathered in the living room, tension thick enough to suffocate. Omar placed a pile of legal papers on the table. "Sign these," he said coldly. "We want full control of the company. It's time you retire." Farid stared at his son, disbelief freezing him. "Retire? The company is our blood, our life." Sara stepped forward. "And now it's ours. We've built something greater than you ever could. Investors want new leadership." The board agreed. Farid felt the room spinning. You turned the board against us?" Omar crossed his arms. "Business isn't personal, Father. This is progress." Progress. A blade disguised as a word. Nadia clutched her chest, breath trembling. "After everything? After we gave you our lives?" Sara's voice was ice. "We'll give you a monthly allowance. You won't have to work anymore." Allowance? As if they were beggars. Farid closed his eyes, the weight of years crushing him. Slowly, with shaking hands, he signed, not because he agreed, but because he could not bear to see his family destroyed by war. When they left the mansion that night, rain soaked their clothes, lightning tearing open the sky. The gate closed behind them like a final sentence. They walked away, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and a lifetime of heartbreak. Behind them, their children turned off the lights and shut the door. And just like that, a kingdom built from love was destroyed by greed. The night Farid and Nadia left their home, the rain felt like punishment from the heavens. The sky roared like a wounded animal, lightning ripping the darkness apart. Their clothes clung to their skin, and the cold pierced through bone and soul. Farid held the small suitcase in one hand, and Nadia's trembling fingers in the other. Their steps were slow, heavy, and uncertain, as if the world beneath them were crumbling. The streetlights flickered above them, and the city around them moved on, indifferent to their suffering. Cars sped by without stopping, windows glowing with other people's lives. Laughter echoed from restaurants and brightly lit buildings. Not a single eye turned toward the couple walking into the night, broken and abandoned. For the first time in decades, Farid and Nadia had nowhere to go. After hours of walking, soaked to the bone, they reached an old neighborhood, the place where their journey once began. The streets were familiar but worn out. The buildings leaned like tired old men. The air smelled like rust and rainwater. A small, shabby apartment stood at the corner, a building so fragile that it looked as if a strong wind could knock it down. A faded for rent sign swung loosely on a rusted chain. They rented a single-room space, barely large enough for a bed, a small stove, and 2 chairs. The walls were damp, the paint peeling in long flakes like dying skin. The roof leaked into a small metal bucket, the dripping sound echoing like a slow clock counting down. But despite the ugliness, Nadia placed her hand over Farid's and whispered, "We are still together. That is enough." Farid tried to smile. His heart, however, was heavy in a way he had never known. The following days crawled by like wounded animals. Farid woke up each morning out of habit, stepping into shoes worn thin by years of labor, only to remember there was no workshop waiting for him, no workers, no machines, no dream. He would sit by the window, staring at the street below, watching people hurry through their lives while his own clock had stopped. The silence was unbearable, the clanging of metal, once the rhythm of his life, had vanished. His hands, once steady and strong, rested uselessly on his knees. Nadia tried to stay strong. She cooked simple meals, sewed clothes for neighbors, and cleaned their small room with care. But every night she found Farid sitting in the dark, shoulders hunched, breath heavy. One night she knelt beside him and cupped his face gently. "Farid, you are not defeated. We have survived harder days." He looked into her eyes that once held the fire of ambition, now clouded with exhaustion. "I do not feel like myself anymore, Nadia. When they took the company, they didn't just take our livelihood, they took the purpose from my hands." A tear slid down her cheek. "We still have each other." He pulled her close, holding her tight as if afraid she too would slip away. The mansion was filled with grandness, but empty of warmth. The walls echoed when Omar and Sara walked through the halls. There were no family dinners, no laughter, no shared prayers before sleep. Just silence, steel, ambition. The boardroom became their battlefield. Investors demanded rapid expansion. Partners pushed for aggressive decisions. Omar and Sara were no longer guided by love, only numbers, charts, profits, pressure. Their titles were impressive: CEO and creative director. But their souls were hollow. They dismissed old employees, the same workers who had once trusted Farid like family. They cut costs, replaced quality with speed, and took risks without measuring consequences. The foundation of the company began to rot. Rumors spread. The Malik heirs don't know what they're doing. The leadership is unstable. Production failures are piling up. Stores returned defective shipments. Investors demanded answers. Machines malfunctioned. Workers complained about unsafe conditions. But Omar's pride was blind. "We're fine. We don't need help." Sara echoed him. "Failure is not an option." But failure does not ask for permission. The storm arrived without warning. One morning, Omar walked into the boardroom expecting another routine meeting, but instead found 10 investors seated with hard eyes and folded arms. "We're pulling out. We refuse to fund any more reckless decisions. You've destroyed stability." Omar's heartbeat pounded violently inside his chest. "You can't just walk away. We have contracts." The lead investor slammed a folder onto the table. "We have legal ground. You mismanaged funds and breached project deadlines. Effective immediately. We are withdrawing all financial support." Sara's face drained of color. "Please, give us more time." He cut her off sharply. "Your father would have never let it come to this." The sentence split them open. Security escorted them out of the room they once commanded. By evening, news headlines flashed across screens. Breaking. Malik and Company. Facing financial crisis. Investors withdraw. Company in freefall. Social media exploded with mockery and rumors. The empire built from sweat was collapsing in real time. Machines stopped. Employees walked out. Suppliers refused to ship materials. Banks froze accounts. The company was declared insolvent. The mansion, cars, and assets were seized by the government. Within weeks, everything was gone. Omar and Sara stood outside the gates of the mansion as officers locked the doors. They were homeless, just like their parents had been forced to become. Back in the small, rented apartment, Farid's health deteriorated. His shoulders slumped deeper each day. His breath grew shorter. His chest tightened frequently. His hands trembled as if fighting invisible battles. One night he collapsed while trying to stand. Nadia screamed his name, her voice cracking like shattered glass. She rushed him to the nearest clinic, a place with peeling paint and flickering lights. The doctor examined him quietly and then spoke words that sliced through her like knives. Extreme stress has severely weakened his heart. He needs rest, stability, and emotional recovery. Nadia's voice broke. Will he survive? The doctor hesitated. We'll try our best, but prepare yourself. Her world spun. Her knees gave way. She grabbed Farid's hand and pressed her forehead against it, sobbing silently. Farid, half conscious, whispered through shaking lips, Don't cry, Nadia. Everything will be all right. Her tears fell onto his hand, burning like fire. Omar and Sara heard about their parents' situation through an old friend of the family. They sat in silence, staring at the wall. Sara's voice trembled. We should go to them, shouldn't we? Omar looked at the ground, shame burning inside him. After everything we said, after what we did, they are still our parents, Sara cried. But pride, that poison, wrapped itself around Omar's throat. Not yet. Let's fix the company first. If we return now, we'll look weak. It was the worst decision of his life. The sky outside the small apartment was dark and quiet. Farid lay on a fragile hospital bed brought into their room. The machine beside him beeped slowly, each sound like a countdown. Nadia sat beside him, her fingers intertwined with his. He looked at her with soft, tired eyes. Do you remember, Nadia? The night we first dreamed of building something together? She nodded, tears escaping. We were young and foolish and fearless. He smiled faintly. We had nothing, yet we felt rich. Nadia pressed her forehead to his. I would live every struggle again if it meant being with you. His voice weakened. Promise you'll forgive them. She closed her eyes. I will try, but my heart is broken. Farid's breathing slowed. His final whisper floated into the air like smoke. Success means nothing if love is lost. The machine let out one long, final tone, and silence swallowed the room. Nadia screamed, a raw, broken sound that shook the walls. She fell onto his chest, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching the body that once held her through every storm. Outside, the world kept moving. People laughed, cars honked, life continued. But for Nadia, time stopped. 2 days later, Omar and Sara stood at the door of the apartment. Their clothes were dirty, their faces swollen from sleepless nights, guilt carving deep lines across their features. They opened the door slowly. Inside, they found Nadia sitting beside a simple wooden box. Farid's coffin, covered with a plain white cloth and a single rose. Her eyes were empty. Her hands were motionless. Her face was pale and hollow. Omar's knees buckled. "Mama?" No response. Sara fell to the ground, sobbing loudly. "We're sorry. Mama, please, say something." Nadia looked at them with eyes that no longer recognized them. Her voice was quiet, but sharper than any blade. "You killed him." The words crashed into them like a violent storm. "We didn't mean—" Omar choked out. She cut him off. "You took his purpose. You broke his spirit. You destroyed everything he built." Tears streamed down Omar's face. "Please forgive us." Nadia turned away. "Forgiveness is easy. But rebuilding a shattered heart takes a lifetime." Omar reached toward the coffin, his hand shaking violently. He touched the wood and collapsed to the floor, screaming, "Baba! Please come back. Please." But no voice answered. Only silence. The morning after Farid's burial crawled in slowly, dragging a gray and lifeless sky behind it. The sun refused to shine, as if mourning along with the shattered family. Omar and Sara sat silently in the small, rented room, their backs against the damp wall, knees pulled to their chests like frightened children. Their faces were pale, eyes swollen, lips trembling but unable to speak. Grief wrapped around them like chains. Nadia stood near the window, staring blankly outside. The world moved without her. Children running to school, shopkeepers opening shutters, birds chirping carelessly. It was unbearable. How could life remain so normal when her world had already ended? The air was thick and heavy, suffocating all hope. Omar finally spoke. His voice cracked. "Mama, please say something." Nadia turned slowly, her expression unreadable. Not angry, not sad, not even disappointed, just numb. A soul emptied. "What is left to say?" she whispered. Sara crawled toward her, clutching her skirt, sobbing violently. "Please forgive us. Please, Mama. Please." Nadia gently pulled her dress from Sara's grip and stepped back. "Your father begged to see you before he died. He waited every day, every hour, believing his children would return." Omar covered his face with shaking hands. "We made a mistake." "You made a choice," Nadia corrected coldly. Over the next few days, Omar and Sara couldn't eat. Food tasted like dust. Water felt like poison. Sleep evaded them, their minds replaying memories like cruel torture. Farid, lifting Omar onto his shoulders as a child. Nadia staying awake to stitch dresses through the night. The four of them laughing over burned bread when the stove broke. The workshop opening day. Farid crying tears of pride. Every memory was a knife. Sara pressed her face into her pillow and screamed until her throat burned. Omar punched the wall until his knuckles split and bled. They thought they had built an empire. Instead, they destroyed a life. And now, they had to live with that. One night, unable to bear the silence any longer, Omar stood up abruptly. "We can rebuild everything," he declared. Sara looked at him with tear-stained eyes. "How?" "We'll start again. We'll open a small workshop like Father did. We will honor him." Sara nodded hope, flickering weakly. Yes, we should. For Baba." Omar rushed toward Nadia. "Mama, we want to start over. We want to fix everything. We will rebuild the business. We'll make him proud." But Nadia did not turn. "You still think this is about business," she said softly. Omar froze. "Your father didn't die because of the company. He died because his heart broke." Silence. "Rebuild whatever you want. It won't bring him back." Omar's chest caved in, breath trembling. Sara sobbed again, but Nadia walked into the other room and closed the door. A quiet click. A wall. One they could not climb. Days turned into weeks. Omar and Sara knew they couldn't live in the darkness forever, or they would drown. They rented a tiny storage garage and cleaned it with trembling hands just like their parents once had. The smell of fresh paint and metal filled the air, stirring memories too painful to bear. Omar bought used tools with borrowed money. Sara found scraps of fabric from thrift shops. Their hands shook from exhaustion. Their hearts bled with regret. But they worked. Every nail Omar hammered felt like repentance. Every stitch Sara made felt like prayer. Sometimes they heard their father's voice. "Work with love, not ego." And they cried silently. One afternoon, a delivery man arrived with a small parcel. It was addressed to Farid Malik. Nadia opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside was a sealed envelope, yellowed and fragile, and a USB drive. The sender's name read, Arman Qureshi, former investor. Omar and Sara exchanged confused glances. Nadia unfolded the letter. As she read, her face darkened with every line. Her hands shook violently. Omar stepped forward nervously. "Mama, what is it?" Nadia looked up, tears burning her eyes, not of heartbreak, but of rage. "Your father was betrayed long before you betrayed him." The room froze. "Our man says the board tricked your father. They forged documents, manipulated numbers, and pushed him out to steal the company." Omar's pulse roared in his ears. "What?" "They used you. They fed your pride. They knew you would break him." Sara backed away, horror creeping up her spine. "So, we weren't the only ones responsible." Nadia's expression hardened, a fire igniting where ashes had once settled. We will take back everything they stole, not with anger. Her voice sharpened into steel, but with justice. For the first time since Farid's death, her eyes were alive. The quiet, humble Nadia was gone. What stood in her place was a storm. The USB contained recordings, financial documents, legal evidence, everything proving the board's conspiracy. Farid had been targeted months before his children ever turned against him. They had manipulated Sara and Omar, feeding them lies so they would unknowingly destroy their father's support system. It was a perfect trap. But now they had the proof. Omar slammed his fist on the table. We will expose them, every one of them. Sara wiped her tears. We will rebuild Baba's legacy and make the world remember his name. Nadia exhaled, a long, steady breath. First, we fight. Omar contacted lawyers. Sara reached out to media outlets. Nadia wrote a public statement, her words trembling with truth. 3 weeks later, they walked into the courtroom. Cameras flashed. Crowds murmured. Reporters shouted questions. Is it true your company was stolen? Did the board push your father to his death? Omar remained silent, jaw tight. Sara clenched her fists. Nadia stepped forward, voice shaking but powerful. My husband died believing he failed his children, but the world needs to know. The failure was never his. Gasps rippled through the room. The trial began. Documents appeared on the giant screen. Forged signatures, false accusations, manipulated balance sheets, audio recordings exposed conversations plotting Farid's removal. The entire courtroom fell silent as Farid's voice played through the speakers, pleading, broken, fighting for the company he built. Omar buried his face in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Lawyers argued. The opposing side crumbled. One by one, the conspirators confessed under pressure. Finally, the judge slammed the gavel. The company Malik and Company is to be legally restored to the Malik family. Charges of fraud and corporate manslaughter will proceed. Crowd erupted. Reporters shouted, flashes blinded. But Omar and Sara didn't celebrate. They just held each other and cried. Because justice does not heal the dead. A packed hall, microphones, cameras, silence. Omar stepped forward. His voice shook. My father was a great man. A man who built an empire with his hands. We betrayed him. We failed him, and we will regret it for the rest of our lives. Sara's voice cracked. To every child watching, never abandon the hands that raised you. Success means nothing without love. Nadia spoke last, her eyes burning. They killed my husband, but I will not let them kill his legacy. Her voice sharpened. This is not revenge. This is justice. Crowd erupted into applause, but Nadia's eyes filled with tears. Farid should have been standing beside her. They reopened the workshop, not the lavish mansion factory, but a humble space filled with memory and love. People lined up outside for hours. Old workers returned voluntarily. Customers cried when they walked in. Posters of Farid hung on every wall. Under his photo, a plaque read, "Success means nothing if love is lost." Omar worked every day like a man repaying a lifelong debt. Sara stitched each dress like a prayer. Nadia guided them silently, her heart stitched with scars. The world celebrated their victory, but their home remained quiet. One chair would forever remain empty. The sun had set, leaving the city cloaked in gray. Rain had begun to fall again, soft and persistent, like the quiet rhythm of grief. Nadia stood alone on the balcony of the small workshop, staring at the neon reflections on wet asphalt. The air smelled of wet stone and memory. Her children, Omar and Sara, were inside the workshop, adjusting machines, checking inventory, preparing for the grand reopening. Their hands worked tirelessly, but their eyes betrayed exhaustion and unease. They had reclaimed the company, yes, but the victory was hollow. Farid's absence echoed through every steel beam, every thread of fabric, every faded photograph. Nadia's fingers traced the edge of her father-in-law's locket, the one Farid had always worn under his shirt. She remembered the first day they had moved into the tiny alley home, young and fearless, and how love had made everything possible. And now, the weight of loss pressed against her chest like a stone. That evening, a group of former board members, now disgraced and desperate, arrived at the workshop. Their eyes darted nervously as they approached Nadia. "Lead board member," sputtering, "Mrs. Malik, we made mistakes. Please, you can't press charges, right? Surely justice—" Nadia turned to face them. Her eyes were dark pools of storm water. "Mistakes?" Her voice was soft, almost casual, but every syllable carried ice. "Do you call killing a man, shattering a family, and destroying lives a mistake?" The men shifted uneasily. Their arrogance had fled. It was replaced with raw fear. "Nadia, you will not walk free. You will face the consequences of your greed. But know this, nothing you pay, no court, no prison will bring back the life you stole. That burden will haunt you forever." The group scuttled away, broken and terrified, but Nadia did not feel relief. The storm within her remained unquenched. Omar and Sara worked tirelessly to rebuild Malik and Company. Machines hummed, fabric spun, orders were filled, business grew once more, yet the joy was hollow. Success, they realized, could not heal the heart. They had reclaimed what they had lost, but nothing could replace their father's guidance, their mother's strength when she was whole, or the love they had betrayed. One night, Omar asked Nadia softly, "Mama, will you come back to the office tomorrow?" She shook her head gently. "I built this life with you, yes, but the world now belongs to you. I have done my part. My presence will only remind you of what was lost." Sara, tears glistening in her eyes, tried to protest. "But you're our mother." Nadia's expression softened for the briefest moment. "And yet, I am not needed. You are strong now, but I must go where sorrow cannot follow." That night, Nadia sat at a small wooden desk. By candlelight, she wrote her final words slow, deliberate. Every word weighted with pain and love. "To Omar and Sara, you have inherited the company. the empire, and the name. But what is a name without its soul? I leave not because I hate you, but because I love too deeply to stay in a world that remembers only loss. Farid's ashes are everywhere. In the walls of the workshop, in the city streets, in your hearts. Guard them, honor them, and remember that greed can kill even the strongest of love. I will vanish. You will not find me, and that is as it must be. Mama. She folded the letter, placing it atop a small box. Inside lay her house keys, Farid's favorite pin, a photograph of the family untouched by time, a silver locket, Farid's initials engraved. She placed the items by the window, letting the stormy wind whisper promises to carry them forward. The streets were empty. Rain soaked the asphalt in sheets, reflecting neon signs like fractured memories. Nadia walked with careful steps, as though testing the air between life and something beyond. She did not look back. She did not pause. Every droplet that fell on her face mixed with her tears, rain indistinguishable from grief. Her eyes were closed. Her mind replayed decades of laughter, pain, sacrifice, and love. She felt Farid's presence around her, in the cold breeze, the smell of wet earth, the faint creak of a swinging sign. She reached the edge of the pier where the waves lashed violently against jagged rocks. The lighthouse, abandoned years ago, cast a ghostly beam across the water. She paused, listening to the roar of the ocean. The world below continued, oblivious to loss, oblivious to love, oblivious to the ashes of betrayal that lingered in every street she had walked. Omar and Sara arrived at the workshop to find the letter. Hands shaking, Omar unfolded it and read aloud, "To Omar and Sara, I leave not because I hate you, but because I love too deeply to stay in a world that remembers only loss." Sara sobbed uncontrollably. Omar whispered, Is she gone?" The wind howled outside, answering with silence. For hours they sat in the workshop, staring at the ocean beyond the city, understanding that some wounds could never be healed. Years passed. Malik and company thrived. Orders poured in. Omar and Sara managed the empire with precision and skill. The public hailed them as prodigies, children who had redeemed their family name. But at night, both of them would sit alone, haunted by a memory that could not be touched. The warmth of their father's smile, the quiet strength of their mother's hands, the presence that had shaped their lives and now was gone forever. No amount of money or success could fill the emptiness. Their legacy had been reclaimed. Yes, but the ashes of betrayal were everywhere, lingering like smoke in the lungs, never leaving. Revenge is not a victory. Justice may be served, but it never brings back the lives lost. Sometimes the ones we love most leave not because of hatred, but because the world is too heavy to bear. Nadia did not vanish in despair. She vanished in peace, in finality, leaving only a warning. That greed, betrayal, and pride consume everything, even the hearts of the living. And in the streets of the city, the name Malik lived on, whispered with respect and sorrow, a legend of love, loss, and the haunting weight of betrayal.